This video will provide you with a quick introduction on how to use CIRIS to record activity and emissions data for transportation sources. Transportation covers all journeys by road, rail, water and air, including intercity and international travel. GHG emissions are produced directly by the combustion of fuel or indirectly by the use of grid-supplied electricity. Collecting accurate data for transportation activities, calculating emissions, and allocating these emissions to cities can be a particularly challenging process. To accommodate variations in data availability, existing transportation models, and inventory purposes, the GPC offers additional flexibility in calculating emissions from transportation. This sheet is split into 5 tables, each of which represents a subsector of the transportation sector. These subsectors are on-road transportation, railways, waterborne navigation, aviation, and off-road transportation. The first table is titled On-Road Transportation and is there for you to capture your city's GHG emissions from sources that are considered to be on-road, such as electric and fuel-powered cars, taxis, buses, trucks, motorbikes, and so on. Remember when completing the transportation sheet that for a basic inventory, cities must report all GHG emissions from combustion of fuels in transportation occurring within the city boundary in Scope 1, and GHG emissions from grid-supplied electricity used for transportation within the city boundary in Scope 2. For a Basic Plus inventory, cities must also include all Scope 3 GHG emissions associated with trans-boundary transportation. Part 2 of the CIRIS User Guide and Chapter 7 of the GPC provide more information on calculating and reporting different transportation emission sources. Let's now go through the process of adding data and reporting emissions in the on-road transportation table in this sheet. As we have seen in the other videos, we first need to add one row by selecting Add and 1. The transportation tables are structured slightly differently from those in the stationary energy sheet, as we need to include additional information on the method used. The GPC contains further details of the different methods that can be used, found in section 7.3. In this example, we are using one of the most common methods for calculating transport emissions, the fuel sales approach, so we will select this from the drop-down list. In the activity column, we can then provide further details. As we are using a fuel sales approach, we should select our fuel type from the list. In this example, we will select motor gasoline (petrol). If we were using an approach based on a traffic model, for example, the city-induced activity, we may prefer to select options such as distance travelled (vehicle). It is also advisable to add a description such as total fuel consumption for gasoline cars, so that we know this data relates only to cars, for example. We can now enter the actual data that we have on fuel use in cars by entering the amount and unit in the activity data columns of 125 million and select litres. You can see there are many unit options to choose from here. We will then enter the gases. As with stationary energy, we should select all 3 greenhouse gases, as they are all relevant for road transport sources. So we will select CO2, CH4 and N2O. We can then select our emission factor. Here we have some pre-populated options we added earlier, and we have one available for gasoline passenger cars, which we can select. If we check, we can see that our emission factor unit and activity data units are both litres, so we don't need to do any conversion of units. If you do need to convert units, the stationary energy video explains how to do this. If we wanted to override the oxidation factor, we can do this here. See the CIRIS user manual for more details on this. We can also add emissions data manually instead, by selecting the tick in the emissions data column. The grey columns then calculate the total emissions. Lastly, As with stationary energy, we add our data quality assessment, a description of the method, and then select the data source. You can see from the drop-down list we have the source Petroleum Company Annual Sales Data Release, which we will select as our data source. We can then add a comment on data quality if we wish. Now that we've finished adding this row, simply repeat this process to add data to the remaining tables for the different activities. As we saw in the stationary energy video, where we don't have any activities to report or cannot report them, we must use a notation key. Where there are no activities occurring, we can use the notation key NO for not occurring. Many cities do not have any waterborne navigation, so we can add NO in the notation keys column for scopes 1 and 2, and then add the comment, "There are no waterways within the city boundary," in the description column. The off-road sector, GPC reference 2.5, is often problematic for cities to report, in particular estimating how much fuel is used off-road versus on-road. In this instance, we could select the notation key IE in the notation keys column to ensure the row is not left blank, and then add a comment in the description column to say emissions included elsewhere in 2.1.1. Data cannot be disaggregated from on-road transport. Some of the tables have been pre-populated with notation keys and explanations, such as Scope 2 aviation, as this is so rarely relevant to cities. If there are emissions to report here, these should be removed. For a quick reminder of which sectors and subsectors are required for Basic and Basic Plus reporting levels for inventories, please refer to the GPC sheet in the Introduction tab.